Hello and welcome back to No Longer Legally Detained, the podcast about life after the psych ward. How do you navigate being an adult when you never expected to be one? Hello and welcome back. It has been a long time. I can't even remember the last time I filmed an episode. I did a kind of like welcome back episode and then kind of disappeared because life has been a lot, but we are back today and I am not going to be making any promises. I think I may have mentioned this in my last one. I can't remember, but the PDA is PDAing. So I have pervasive drive for autonomy, or otherwise known as pathological demand avoidance. And what I have learned is that when I tell myself I announce that I'm going to do something, it's almost as if the universe then throws more excitement into my life than usual. And it means that I literally, as soon as I say I'm going to do it, it's almost as if the universe then completely goes against me. So I am just seeing what happens, but I thought I would do a little catch-up episode because a lot has changed and a lot is happening, and this mic is broken, so I can't even attach it to myself, and I've lost my other mic, so that is a little bit problematic. So if you're watching this podcast, you can see that I'm literally holding the mic, but I've got a new little backdrop. I was in the process of tidying my room, and I think that because I was meant to be tidying my room, I obviously decided that this was the perfect time to film a podcast episode. So here we are. But yeah, I wanted to do a little catch up. Things have changed, and there's some exciting things kind of coming in the form of legally detained, and hopefully also no longer legally detained, the podcast. So yeah, it's exciting, and I am really looking forward to what is to come. So I did a new intro post on my Instagram yesterday, and I'm just going to read it onto here because I have a real issue of as soon as I start recording, I seem to lose the ability to speak. But I thought I would do this intro on here as well because I know not everybody follows my Instagram as well. So if you don't, please do. That would mean a lot. But I give a bit of context of who I am for any new listeners. So my name is Hannah, and the reason that this is called No Longer Legally Detained starts with my blog that was originally called Legally Detained. And the name came to me while I was an inpatient in a psychiatric hospital. I spent 5 years in and out of those wards, and during one of my latest admissions, I decided I wanted to start a blog. Legally Detained came to mind instantly, but I was too scared to say it out loud until another patient told me that it was perfect. Originally, it reflected being detained under the Mental Health Act, but now it's become a metaphor for something so much bigger. The invisible chains of systems, expectations, and norms that silence people like me. It's about questioning and reclaiming. It's about telling the messy, uncomfortable stories that make people stop, think, and learn. Because for me, it's never about blame. It's about making sure what happened to me doesn't happen to anybody else. And now I developed that as a little kind of metaphor, a little butterfly into No Longer Legally Detained, which is the podcast, and symbolizing both physical and emotional freedom. So what do? I use creativity, theatre, writing, and performance to challenge ableism and tokenism. I deliver workshops, talks, and consultancy on inclusion, neurodiversity, neurodivergence, trauma, and youth voice. I've worked with over 30 organisations, from Chicken Shed to Mind, Young Minds, the PDA Society, and the National Autistic Society, helping create spaces where lived experience leads, not just follows. And I'm also developing a musical that I've written myself. So where am I now? I'm currently studying inclusive performance at Chicken Shed Theatre, where creativity and access truly can coexist. I completed a foundation in musical theatre at Mount View, and I'm building Legally Detained into a creative and social impact business, transforming survival into power. I'm a recipient of a Challenge and Change grant from the Belgrave Trust to expand my social action and creative activism. And that is kind of partly why I wanted to do this episode, and to talk a bit about kind of some of the plans that are coming up. I am developing my original musical, Rulebook to Society, a neurodivergent-led piece about belonging, rebellion, and identity. I host this podcast, No Longer Legally Detained, exploring lived experience, creativity, and freedom. And I'm also a member of the National Youth Theatre. And for me, one of the quotes that I live by is, embracing my authentic self and my existence is an act of radical defiance. So why did I do this? Why did I start this? At first, my reason was really simple: survival. If I had to stay alive in what felt like such an evil world, the only way I could was by making a difference. I did it, and still do, for baby Hannah and for all the other little Hannahs who've been told they're too much, too broken, and too difficult to help. I do it because I know what it feels like to be given up on, to be discharged, discarded, judged, misunderstood, and unwanted, to be labelled the problem, to be unsafe in the presence of people who are supposed to support you and protect you, to rebuild yourself from the ashes of everything you were told you would never be. And now, every time I speak, create, perform, or write, I'm doing it for them, for the ones still fighting to be seen, believed, and to be safe. I do it to look the people in the eye who once told me I couldn't, and to say that I did. And now I'm fighting to make sure others can too. Because the truth is, the traits that once got me dismissed are the very reason I do what I do now. The empathy that once overwhelmed me makes me a better facilitator. The chaos that once broke me fuels my creativity. The sensitivity that people try to silence lets me see the others that are overlooked. Everything I create, whether it's a performance, a poem, a post, or a conversation, comes from that truth that we were never broken, only powerful in ways the world wasn't ready to see. I want my work to make people stop and think, to feel uncomfortable but hopeful, to see themselves in stories they've been taught to look away from. And that's my truth, turning the things that nearly destroyed me into the tools that build connection, courage, and change. Because survival isn't my ceiling, it's just the starting point. I'm autistic, ADHD, PDA, and have complex trauma. This means that life can be unpredictable, beautiful, and messy. Some days I'm speaking at national conferences, and other days I'm under a blanket with Teddy, usually crying. That's not a contradiction, that's just humanity. Inclusion starts with honesty, not perfection. I was never made to fit into neat boxes, and now I've stopped trying to. My brain is both an orchestra and a thunderstorm of ideas, feelings, and melodies colliding. That chaos is where my creativity lives. I bring big picture vision, emotional depth, and the ability to turn pain into performance. I lead with empathy, humour, and honesty, because that's how real change happens. Some fun fact about me, if you don't know, I play 14 musical instruments, 15 including voice. I'm fueled by salted caramel frappes, chocolate, and my best friend Teddy, my loyal, fully dressed companion who has more outfits than I do. I'm obsessed with bullet journaling, junk journaling, and art journaling. Basically, if it has involved creativity and stationery, I'm in. I was shortlisted for a third sector award, although I didn't win, it's still a very big and very proud achievement. I have my level 4 Makaton, and I also completed my Bronze and Silver Duke of Edinburgh awards. I'm also the owner of a perforated nasal septum, a rare side effect of a medical procedure, because apparently I also, as well as collecting unusual facts, literally can't read. I'm an owner of a perforated nasal septum, a rare side effect of a medical procedure, because apparently I collect unusual facts as much as I do instruments. And the biggest fact is I really, 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 really want a puppy. So what you'll find here on my socials, on my blog, is honest reflections on neurodivergence, trauma, inclusion, and recovery, creative activism, unapologetic storytelling, and resources for self and system change, humour, hope, and raw reality, because surviving is hard, but thriving should be possible. So if you've ever been told you're too much or not enough, you're in exactly the right place. I would love for you to follow, to share of my platforms, because the more interaction there is, the more people who can hopefully get involved and see that life is going to be okay and life is worth living. I think as someone who struggled so significantly with their mental health, mental illness, and who even recently was left feeling completely broken, this world is a really scary place at the moment. There's so much happening. There's so much what feels like a lack of control in areas, and so much hatred. There is moments of good. I used to be someone who very much was like, yes, there is good, but like, we can't forget about the bad. We can't forget about the bad. We can't forget about the things that are happening. However, if we live in just the bad, and although we have to acknowledge the suffering that's going on, because if we don't acknowledge it, then we can't do anything to change it, we also have to look after our own well-being and our own mental health and our own kind of life, because if we can't pour from an empty cup. And I think recently I have been trying to embrace the I don't give a fuck attitude, but in a positive way, of realizing that we only have one life. And there is some really, really shit things happening. There are really, really, really shit things. And there's so many things that I feel powerless to be able to control or to change. And in some ways, I felt that by having kind of not an optimistic attitude, but like I really never want to fall into toxic positivity, because as someone who has had toxic positivity shoved down their throat so many times, there is nothing more annoying or jarring than someone, even though it can be well intentioned, telling you, just be positive and just keep going, all that are good in the world, when you are surrounded by some of the most horrific things. And I think, there is actually a lot of damage that can occur from toxic positivity. But I also think that we have a responsibility in our own lives to have a way and a reason to keep going. And I think it's about balancing the two. At the beginning of October, I started a little kind of creative reflection series on my Instagram called No Longer Legally Detained. And it was all about kind of turning survival into power, defiance, and radical self-acceptance. And I realized that for so long, for so many years, I lived in survival mode, detained by systems, by shame, by the fear of being too much and not enough all at the same time. And I kept waiting for the world to tell me that I was finally okay. And I think what I realized was that I am done waiting. And I think over the past couple of months, I've realized how much I was waiting for the validation of other people to tell me that I was enough to be able to believe it myself. And I think that's something that so many of us kind of struggle with. And I think it's something that I spoke about a lot, and also almost spoke about as if maybe I'd overcome. And I think it was something that I realized that I was, as much as I could talk on a surface level about not waiting for other people to validate you, there was so many situations where I think I got to the stage where, in situations where people who I didn't necessarily respect or people who had hurt me, I was able to be like, no, I don't need to wait for their kind of acceptance. I don't need their validation. However, people I did care about, and are people who I really wanted to be approved by, I was still waiting for that. And I think what I've come to realize in the past kind of couple of weeks is that that was something that I still struggled with. And I think just being able to acknowledge that was such a massive kind of turning point. And it doesn't mean that it's easy, and it doesn't mean that I still don't want that validation. And I think it's one of the biggest kind of areas that I've realized is within my uni and being at Chicken Shed, is that there's such a big part of me that is waiting for the validation from them in certain ways. And it's not that they don't validate me, it's not that they don't say nice things about me, but I think it's not about that. And I think that what I realized is that for me, waiting for their validation in ways that I thought were validating was actually holding me back from ever getting those opportunities, and being able to live a happy, free, and fulfilling life in all aspects of my life. And I think it was, and this is again nothing against anybody there, it's all a personal thing of I was waiting for them to show me that I was a good enough performer. But in doing so, in waiting for their validation, I was actually not showing my best performing. And I think these are the kind of things that I've learned, and I'm learning that when I talk about no longer being detained by other people's perspectives and the need for validation from other people, that is all people, not just people who have hurt me or people who I don't respect. It's being able to love a place and love the people and really respect their opinions and listen and want their feedback and their, constructive criticism, because that's what learning's about. But equally, not being chained to them having the power of whether I am happy or whether I have any self-worth. And I think that the difference is so small and so nuanced, yet is completely gosh, that was, if you could hear that was me opening Instagram to read my No Longer Legally Detained post, and something else was making noise at me. But yeah, I think it's something that I realized that, being detained wasn't just by bars and handcuffs. It was often the invisible restraints of perfectionism and burnout, and the constant pressure to earn my right to exist. And freedom doesn't start when everything's fixed. It starts the moment you stop waiting for permission to take up space as you are. And that is why I realized that actually for me, the biggest constraints I had was not the places that didn't want me, it was the places that did want me, who I was still waiting for things to be quote unquote perfect, or like for me to have certain things to then feel like now I have permission to take up space. I have permission to take up space regardless of whether I am performing in a certain part, or whether I am got a certain job, or whether I'm, any of these things, whether I'm, chosen or not chosen. Regardless of that, I deserve to take up space, and I don't have to wait for to be chosen to then take up space, if that makes sense. I'm not sure whether that really makes any sense. This is like a completely unplanned episode because all of my things at the moment are a little bit like spontaneous. And it was the realization that like no one else gets to decide my worth, not a system, a diagnosis, not a stranger's tone or a professional report. And that is been one of the most freeing kind of realizations. And in a world obsessed with perfection and productivity, the most radical act of defiance is to love yourself anyway, to rest, to be gentle, and to show up as real. Self-acceptance is a protest, kindness is resistance, and bringing that energy into every room you enter is revolution. And I think what I realized was there is so much I don't like about this world. There's so much that makes me cross and angry. There was so much suffering. There were so many unkind people. There were so many unkind words. There were so many people who are experiencing such pain and suffering. And as much as there is sometimes feelings of guilt of kind of living when other people don't get to, what I realized is that by me also suffering, that doesn't make it any better for them. Me suffering at the same time as other people just means there's double the suffering. And I think it was such a hard thing to come to realize in a world where there is a lot of kind of shame around people being happy and people living. Actually, if I can do one thing, is if I can live and bring an energy into every space that I go into of love and of care and of unapologetic authenticity. And if when people come into contact with me, they feel listened and seen and heard, or whatever, any of those things, that is all I can do. And actually it's quite a, I guess, it's probably not just adjust. It's a thing. And that's what I want to bring into every single interaction I have, is I want to be that person that is that break for that person, for that other person. I know, that in the times of some of like my biggest suffering, when I was struggling with some really, really horrific kind of forms of abuse, actually it wasn't the people who kind of was also struggling that necessarily gave me the thing that I needed. It was the person who showed up as their unapologetic, authentic self and listened, or we might not even have, discussed what was happening in my life or their life. It was just being, and that person who kind of brought some of the most ridiculous, silly joy are the people who show up and who aren't bothered what other people think and aren't concerned about proving themselves. They just are, and they are some of the most inspiring and like beautiful people. And I think that's what I came to realize, and that is what I really want to focus on. As I think I mentioned earlier, I've been awarded some funding from the Blagrave Trust, and I'm so excited to be able to look. I first need to read about my application because I have to do whatever I said in my application, and I can't remember what I said in my application. But I'm excited to have the opportunity, this amazing opportunity. I look back at little baby Hannah, who was just so scared and so terrified, and I look at teenage Hannah, who was stuck in all of those units and who was being restrained and who was, overly medicated, and who was so determined to kind of self-destruct, and who really thought that there was no hope, that I would never be able to be happy. And even in the times when I was out of hospital, it still felt impossible to have any kind of life. Like I never thought I'd be able to live. Like I didn't know how to live, how to exist away from, pain and suffering. And I know it's cringy, I know it's cliche, and I know, if I'd been listening to someone, I'd have been like, well, yeah, I'm different, you don't know. But I spent 5 years in and out of psychiatric inpatient units. And if you're in one of those units right now and you're listening to this, I know it's scary. And the biggest and the most scary thing is actually coming out of one of those places and staying out and ripping off that band-aid. And it is the first bit is the most painful bit. It's like jumping out of a burning building, and to jump through the fire is the hardest part, and it hurts and it makes you want to go back into the burning building, but ultimately the only way is to jump through. And every time you go back into the burning building, you're going to have to burn yourself more to get out, and it's going to be more painful because you've already got those burns. And I really just urge anybody who is stuck in a hospital, in the system, within mental illness, I really want to say obviously I don't know your situation because I'm not you, but I do know what that's like, and I do know how all encompassing and all consuming it is, and I know how in some ways it feels safer. And unless you've been there, you will think that's crazy, but those who are there will know. But I really can't tell you enough how, although it is the most painful thing to jump out of that building through the fire, once you've done it, you never have to go back in. And all of that pain that's associated with that building, yes, when you have burns, as we know, it's a really great, what's it called? Is it a metaphor? Not a metaphor. It's I can't remember the word. But to begin with, you will be more sensitive, and it will feel, the air on your burns will feel really raw and really painful, and it will feel as if maybe you were safer back inside. But I urge you with everything in my body and my person that there is so much more to life. And whatever has happened, and I can say that, I'm not going to go into details because, I haven't put a trigger warning on this. I'm not going to go into any details, but let me tell you, I do know, and I have witnessed and been, the quote unquote victim to some really evil acts of humanity. And I know that makes you want to disappear yourself, but that is what they want. Or they don't care. Either way, literally F them. The most powerful thing you can do is live. And I had a quote on my Instagram the other day, which was, success is the greatest form of revenge. And to be able to stand up there, look those people in the eye who said that you couldn't, and say that you did. And I think it is so hard. I know it's so hard. And I feel like I'm just saying the same thing, but I just keep seeing, so many people that I know who are still stuck. And as hard as it is, and let me tell you, it is hard, capital HARD, it is hard. And life will continue to throw you, a lot. But there is just so much out there, and so much to experience, and so much to do. And I just really hope that if you are stuck in one of those situations, that you are able to find that strength that you already have, because you are so strong and you can do it. And I'm going to kind of end this episode with sharing some of the things that I am no longer detained by, because I think that this is what this podcast is about. This is what everything that I do is about. It took me so long to realize, and I want to help even just one person not take quite as long as it took me, and to realize that you are so worth so much more. So I am no longer detained by the professionals who told me I was too difficult to help. I am no longer detained by the idea that peace only comes after forgiveness. I am no longer detained by my inbox. Emails really are the source of all evil. I am no longer detained by the idea that activism means self-sacrifice. I am no longer detained by being misunderstood. I've made peace with being misread. I am no longer detained by the idea that I have to be okay all of the time. I am no longer detained by the fear of outgrowing people who preferred me unwell. I am no longer detained by the myth that I owe constant resilience to the world. I am no longer detained by the voice that says I should be over it by now. I am no longer detained by systems that call control care. I am no longer detained by the versions of me created for other people's comfort. I am no longer detained by the expectations to be grateful for basic rights. I am no longer detained by the urge to make myself easier to love. I am no longer detained by the myth that I have to be understood to be valid. I am no longer detained by shame, mine, theirs, all of it. I am no longer detained by systems that confuse compliance for healing. I am no longer detained by the paperwork version of who I am. I am no longer detained by the idea that professionalism means pretending I'm okay. I am no longer detained by the demand to be palatable, polished, or perfectly okay. I am messy, I am real, and I am still here. And that is enough. Please do follow, give 5 stars to this podcast, and I would love to know that what you are no longer legally detained by. Actually, no, not legally, just no longer detained by. Forget the legal part. What you are no longer detained by, and please do tag at legally detained and use the hashtag no longer detained. We are unapologetically ourselves, and we deserve the freedom and the life that we always should have had. Look after yourselves, take care, rest, and see you very soon. Bye bye.